Hi, I'm Kim Stevens here at Fox 26 Newsroom. And in this very charged political climate, you may be feeling anxiety. You know, we have the Republican National Convention finishing up this week and the Democratic National Convention coming up. And there is so much happening in both parties, but it's not just the national election. There's a lot going on here at home too, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. So I thought I would bring somebody on here who can help us navigate our feelings, because there can be a lot of stress, anxiety, or maybe even problems within families, or very intense conversations, if not fights, whether it's face-to-face or even on social media, because people are very passionate about their feelings. So I'd like to introduce you to Colleen Marshall. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist who is here to kind of help us navigate through these feelings. Colleen, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kim. I appreciate it.
Now, I know that you help people in lots of different situations, but we're talking specifically the political climate that we're in right now. Are you seeing, or maybe have you been seeing over the last either year or since maybe 2020, more people coming in with anxiety caused by our political climate?
Yeah, so the American Psychiatric Association just did a survey recently where they asked a group of Americans around what are the things that are causing their anxiety. And about 73% indicated that our elections are part of the source of anxiety. About 80% of the reason people come into treatment is either anxiety or depression related in general. So it's not uncommon for us to see anxiety as the sort of the source of why someone comes into treatment. But for sure, the election is causing more anxiety in folks more in recent years.
We can say that we are feeling frustrated, or, oh my gosh, if I hear that person say one more thing, I'm going to lose my mind. You know, we can have these thoughts, but at what point do we know that we really need to talk to somebody?
Yeah, so not just with the election, but just in general with anxiety, when you start noticing that that's impacting your daily functioning. So what that means is it's impacting your relationships, it's impacting your ability to work or go to school, it's impacting your sleep, it's impacting your ability to get daily tasks done. When you're starting to see it's really impacting you, that is a sign that it is not just generalized anxiety or just stress. It has now crossed over into something that you probably should seek out some help. Because the good news is there's lots of treatment options out there and they're very, very effective. So you don't have to suffer. You can learn coping skills and strategies and ways to manage the anxiety. But it's really looking at, is it impacting you in a way that is uncomfortable for you? Because anxiety is on a continuum. We can have stress. It can be triggering to watch the news, let's say, and it brings up source of anxiety. But if you can sort of go on with your day and it doesn't impact you ongoing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to see a therapist, for instance.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the many different treatments. We certainly are in a day and age where people just want to kind of pop a pill and be good with whatever ails you. But do you recommend that someone talk with someone with a license like you first before you get even to that point?
Yeah, so it really depends on what's happening for you as to whether medication or talk therapy would be recommended. But talk therapy can be as effective as antidepressant medications, for example. Specifically, a treatment called cognitive behavioral therapy has been proven to be very useful and helpful, because what we learn in therapy is how to really manage our thoughts, because our thoughts can trigger our emotions and our emotions can trigger some of the negative consequences that we're talking about now and the impact on our daily life. And so when we can really look at our thoughts in a more rational, realistic perspective, we can manage and reduce our anxiety ourselves. So there's lots of treatments that help with that. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, a sort of community or ACT or DBT or solution focused therapy. So there's lots of different options out there for folks. But it really comes down to the core of looking at when you're anxious, your thoughts become sort of these cognitive distortions is what we call them, which are just assumptions that we're making that aren't actually factual. So for example, if I think that the candidate I don't want to get elected gets elected, my whole ruined, that is a overgeneralization, and it isn't factually true. So if you look at that thought more from like a reframed perspective, it's true that the person might impact your life in a way that they're on the news more, they're in your life for 4 more years. They might impact some of our government policies that might impact you, but they aren't going to change your family, your friends, where you eat dinner, your job, where you go on vacation, things like that. So if you look at it from a balanced perspective, like, yeah, it'll impact me and maybe there'll be things I won't really love, but it's not going to ruin my whole life. And just having that reframe can help reduce our anxiety. So those are some of the skills that we talk about in treatment.
Wow, that is helpful. When you do the talk therapy, do you ever recommend that someone just talk with a friend first, but before they go to a licensed clinician?
I do think friends and family and support can be really helpful. Again, it really depends on what's happening for you, because sometimes just talking with someone can help you feel better and reduce, especially if there's somebody that is in agreement with you about how you're feeling. It sort of normalizes your experience. But there are skills that therapists can teach people that just the common normal public doesn't have, like, setting boundaries with, how often you're letting this content come into your life, setting boundaries with families and friends, setting boundaries around what you're willing to talk about, not talk about, in a way that feels genuine to who you are. Those are types of skills that therapists are trained to help people learn that our general family members may not necessarily be good at. So I don't think everyone has to go to therapy. I'm definitely not someone that believes we all need therapy. But when it is impacting that daily functioning, I wouldn't be afraid to reach out to someone, even for 1 or 2 sessions. There's employers have something called EAPs, or employee assistance programs, that can do very quick interventions that can be useful and helpful. And then there's more traditional therapy, like my company does, where it's more of a 10 to 12 session type therapy.
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask you, how many times is therapy necessary? And you bring up a really good point that a lot of times employers have it kind of built in or baked into their the industry or their office, so that you can have 1 to 3 to who knows how many sessions to just talk with someone. That's probably a first good step, huh?
Yeah. So the good thing that COVID actually helped us all move therapy into more of a teletherapy space, because we had to, and it actually created access. So now therapy is much more accessible for folks. You can see somebody on your lunch hour, for instance, where before you would have had to take time off of work and drive to an appointment, and it made it a little harder. But the best place to start is to be looking at what resources you already have, because you don't want this to be a financial burden as well. So you can look at your employer, see what mental health offerings that they offer. Sometimes, EAPs, as an example, are offered, but also your insurance usually covers therapy. So you can start there. If you're in school, you can definitely look at, universities have counseling centers and can help with access there. And then there's a lot of providers that are teletherapy, so that you can see them just like you and I talking right now. And that's been proven to be as effective as in-person treatment. So you can make it as flexible for you as possible.
Okay, great. That's really good to know, because we had been doing a number of stories since COVID. I mean, through and since that, so many people were looking for someone to talk with, meet with, and it was very difficult to even get an appointment or find somebody in their community.
Yeah. And the one thing that here at Two Cheers that's important to us is we know that getting the right therapist is as important as getting into care, because the research is really clear that the alliance, the therapeutic alliance, is the best predictor for positive outcomes. And so one of the things that we do, the first thing we do is we have our very first appointment with our clients is a matching appointment where a licensed therapist meets with you, assesses you, and then also is looking at to what kind of therapist is going to be best suited for you. So if you're not coming to somewhere like Two Chairs that does the matching for you and helps you find the right provider, one of the things I always recommend to friends and family is interview 2 or 3 therapists and find the one that you feel most heard and understood by, because that relationship is critical to therapy working.
If we were to decide to go into therapy, what can we expect it to be like? Is it an hour, 50 minutes of just talking? You know, sometimes you see on TV, you know, you go in and you want to kind of fix, you know, something that's weighing on you, but then you get the question, tell me about your mother. I mean, I know that this is just, you know, from TV and movies, but let's have a reality on that, please.
Yeah, so it usually is about 50, 55 minutes, so that we call it the therapy hour. So, you know, think about it having a blocked hour, but you'll be done 10-ish minutes before the hour's over. And it really depends on the treatment that you're getting is what the session will look like. But your first meeting will be a lot of your therapist asking you questions about what's happening, what brings you into treatment today, why now, why not, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and then specifically asking you questions about symptoms. So it might feel a little bit like going to urgent care. Like, is this causing you sleep problems? Are you noticing any change in your appetite? Tell me how this is different than how it was a couple of weeks ago. Has this been something persistent, ongoing? And basically what they're trying to do is assess and come up with a diagnosis so they know what exactly we're treating. And once that's clear, then you and your therapist will collaboratively create a treatment plan together. So we'll both say, okay, based on everything you just shared with me, here's what I think is happening and going on. And what I would recommend is we do X, Y, or Z. How does that feel for you? And then you get to weigh in on, well, that sounds okay. Or actually, I was hoping we would do more X, Y, or Z. And then you come up with basically a treatment plan that you're going to use to guide treatment session by session. And then that's where the different therapeutic approaches out there will come into play. So if we're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, then our sessions are going to be around me doing a little education around what cognitive behavioral therapy is, and then helping you apply those skills into your daily life. So you might come in and talk about your week, but we're going to use that week to talk about, okay, now let's use this skill of reframing that sort of negative thought that you are having in a way that is more balanced, and you'll practice in session. So it looks different based on the treatment you're getting, but the therapist will be guiding you through that process. So it isn't usually like, tell me about your mother. It's more about what's happening in your life now and what skills could really help you think about making your life feel more balanced and less anxious, less depressed, whatever the thing is you're coming in for treatment.
Right. How is treatment, is there a cost that is kind of a general cost that one could kind of plan for or save for?
Yeah, so most insurances will cover this, and then it's just your copay and deductible is usually how most of the people that we see are covered through their insurance, which is great. There was a parity laws helped with that, where we made sure that mental health was equal on par with medical treatment, because really mental health is health. So we really were lucky that way. So you really could just be budgeting for what your copay and your deductibles would be to manage treatment. If you don't want to use your insurance for some reason and you want to just pay out of pocket, then it really depends on the provider that you're looking for. Some providers do things like sliding scale fees, where they look at your income and they're able to set the rate based on something more affordable for you. But it's sort of a range out there of who you're seeing and what providers you're looking for.
You bring up a good point of some people may not want to use insurance because maybe they don't want their employer knowing that they're needing to call somebody or contact somebody for help. Can you help blast through the stigma that does not mean if a boss finds out that you've just gone to somebody to talk to, that means you're not worthy of being employed there?
Yeah. And I mean, I would love for just the stigma to be understood. Like, no one's going to be upset if you went to have a diabetes screening, but so to go have an anxiety or depression screening is the same. The truth is your employer won't know that you're accessing that care in that way. They usually look at an aggregate of how their insurance is being used. And they aren't going to see, for instance, like Kim went to see a therapist, and they know that because that's protected by confidentiality and HIPAA. Okay. They'll just know that you've used your insurance, or how much of the insurance is our employees using. So I wouldn't worry about the confidentiality part. Your employer won't know unless you share with them or you ask for time off or something. So that's not something I would be concerned about for sure, because confidentiality will protect you. Therapy is protected by law. It's private, it's confidential. Your therapist is not allowed to share with others what you're sharing with them without a signed written consent to do that.
Thank you for that. What if we have a family member who we feel is going down a scary rabbit hole and we want them to be the one getting help? Or maybe, you know, okay, maybe it's both of us or all of us better understanding. How do we go about that? Is therapy usually just a one-on-one, or can it be, you know, a spouse or a brother or sister or something?
Yeah, so my training actually is marriage family therapy, which means that we treat the entire family and or couples and or individuals. So there is definitely treatment for the whole system, the families, the couples, the individuals. When adults are involved instead of children, with children, it's a little easier because you're the parent and you can, you know, bring the child into care and go in with the child. But if I have adult children, or if we're talking about my adult parents, it's harder because they obviously have choice. They get to decide whether or not they want treatment or not. So one of the things you could start with is really just being clear with your family members about what you're worried about and that you care about them. So starting with the relationship first. Mom, I love you. I'm very worried that I notice that you seem more and more agitated, more and more unhappy. And I don't want you to be unhappy and agitated, and I'd like to help. And I think if we went to treatment together or therapy together, maybe that could help, and I'll go with you, or, you know, I'll be there, whatever it is to help get them there. But really it's pointing out what you're noticing, why you're worried, and connect it back to the relationship. Like, you matter to me. That's why I'm talking about this. And you know, and sometimes us going to treatment ourselves and seeing a therapist to manage, like, let's say your mom is the one you're worried about and she isn't going into treatment, then you yourself going into treatment to help you think about and understand how to work with that decision that your mom is making can be useful too.
Oh, that's okay. Shoot. What was my next question going to be? It was on the tip of my tongue, and then you had me thinking about my family. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. I know. It's probably the worst question I could ask as a news anchor. Is it just easier for people to just turn off the TV, turn off the radio, and maybe turn off their social media channels for a little while?
Yeah, I don't know if so what I always talk to people about is boundaries, and we're all different humans. So for some people that might cause you more anxiety to not know what's going on and be caught by surprise. For other people, it's a good choice is to turn off or to moderate it. So for instance, for me, it might be I want to listen to the news 1 hour a week because I feel like I can get everything I need in 1 hour a week, but I do want to know what's going on in the world. So 1 hour feels right for me. My husband is a history professor. So for him, he's on constantly. He's on, you know, he wants to know what's happening. So for him, he would feel disconnected if he wasn't. So he has to think for himself, like, what's the right level? But that's why I would talk about boundaries for you. And it's really trying it on. Like, is it 1 hour a day? Does that feel okay? Can you watch the news and then turn it off and the anxiety isn't overwhelming for you? Is it, you know, turning off social media, but only watching the evening news? Is it only engaging in social media when you feel like it and not watching the news? So it's just playing with all the different things and setting the boundary that's right for you and just noticing how it's affecting you.
Okay, good point. I have noticed usually around the summertime, people are on, you know, social media and they're showing all of these beautiful pictures of their vacations. And here I am at work by choice. And it really bummed me out one summer. I mean, I started to get really bummed out. I was, I guess they call it FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And I just got in my head. So I had to stop it for a little while.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a perfect example of that. It's just being clear about noticing how is it impacting me and is it serving me or not? And if it's not serving me, then set a boundary around it. And sometimes we can't turn off what's happening in our world. Like, we can't avoid everything, but we certainly can control whether or not we're going to read that story or click on that link or watch that show. So, I mean, what you did for yourself is exactly right. It's like, if it's bumming me out, then I don't want to do it right now. Like, I'll want to see your great vacation pictures when I'm on vacation too. So let me wait until my vacation trip, you know, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, see, I'm learning from my moments of getting to talk with you. So, one last thing, if there is anything else that you want to leave viewers with, anything else to help them in this hot political climate right now.
Yeah, we learned a lot through positive psychology research around really thinking about what brings you joy and bliss. Because when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling like, I mean, part of why the election anxiety is causing so much anxiety is we feel like it's out of our control. Like I can vote, but I can't actually control the outcome. And when we feel that way, our anxiety gets really high. And so one thing to do is also think about the things that really bring you joy. So exercising, being out in nature, spending time with good friends, laughing, seeing a good movie. Think about those things as important as keeping up with the news or keeping up with what's happening in the world, so that you're keeping a balanced view. Like maybe this is stressful and you're not really loving how this is going right now, but there are things in your life that are going well and that you're grateful for. And so trying to keep that balance can be really helpful.
Oh, yeah, right. Remembering all of the blessings that you do have, because, yeah, that's really helpful. Oh my gosh, Colleen Marshall, thank you so much for sharing this insight with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have just ended.